start this off with a few photos if you haven't been following this set of tapes. In the last set on number 11 we showed the gold ink lines, and here's a good example of Glenn Medder's plane. He had replaced the bell crank. The bell crank wore out and had it laying over. They were replacing the bell crank at the 85 team trials. Big Art had made him a aluminum bell crank, and you can see some of the nice ink line jobs. Now on this tape we're going to be doing some sanding of clear and buffing maybe. We're at that point in time, and we'll try to fill you in on any tricks we have to make the job easier and more pleasant. There's a photo from the 85 team trials. Here we are out in the parking lot, and unfortunately one of the sad notes of this team trials was Bob Barron crashing. And this was Bob Barron's ship. He used flexible lead outs, and this is a good example of what happens when you don't do flexible lead outs right. And obviously I have always used solid lead outs, and I recommend everybody use solid lead outs. Here's the reason why. Now I know this is hard to believe, but the next plane Bob built, he used flexible lead outs. Hard to believe, huh? And what happened last year at the team trials, the cable in Bob's handle broke. If you look real close in this photo, you can see the wire broke right at the end of the bell crank. And I tell you, let's hope that this little lesson is going to save somebody from losing an aeroplane. Another photo from the 85 team trials, Billy Werwich's Juno. Beautiful plane. This was an old guy, but he's still flying real good. The original Juno. Here's a rare picture of Larry Scarinzi back when we were originally flying the sweeper the first couple of times. Notice, 10 years before tuned pipes, we had the muffler exiting into a rubber tube and out the back of the plane. 10 years before they ever invented tuned pipes. Now there's a picture of a man who was ahead of his time, or whatever you want to call it. The stump puller, the stone crusher, the Bhagwan Supreme, Jim Greenaway. Here's a rare old picture from '83 with my MiG, and I had a matching Yak 9, both in Russian Air Force paint jobs. Real nice vintage photo of the old Executioner. Gone but not forgotten. Look at that canopy. Kind of a cool picture from the 85 team trials. I can't even tell whose plane this is, but it's right here and it's inverted. Kind of a cool picture. 1985 team trial picture. From 1985, Bob Whiteley. Bob Whiteley. Team trial picture. And again from the 85 team trials, Dennis Adamson. He was one of the alternates that year. More pictures from the 85 team trials. Gone but not forgotten. This was Pete Bergstrom's plane. It was kind of a copy of Paul Walker's plane, again from the 85 team trials. Okay, you should have your VCR all tracked in. We'll load up the gun and get our buttocks down to the shop and do some work. Now on the last video we put on about 2/3 of the amount of clear that we wanted to put on. And we've been having this sit. You can see this is sitting right by a heating vent. But if you decide you're going to put it by a heating vent to dry out, make sure it's not going to be hotter, say, than hot to the touch. I've seen paint blister up when you try to quick dry it or dry it with hair dryers or anything. I'd suggest you don't do that. So what I'm going to do now, this has been drying out for a few days. what I want to do is go over and take a sample piece. In this case I have the tip weight box or the cowl or whatever, and just see how hard the paint is, and let's run a little test, see if it's hard enough. Maybe we'll be able to do a little sanding today, and maybe even a little buffing out. Alright, now because this is acrylic, it's usually relatively easy to buff out. I'll take the little piece out while it was drying. You can see even if you don't buff it out, it has a pretty nice shine to it. Acrylic dries up nice, but this is not the same as a buffed out finish. Believe me, this has the epoxy look, the K&B epoxy look, plastic look, whatever you want to call it. And in my book, this is certainly not in a class with a buffed out lacquer finish. So what I'm going to do now, this is a test. The reason you do this test is you want to see how hard the paint is. Sometimes it's hardened up in 2 or 3 days. Again, I'm using the Sikkens M600. Sometimes you want to rush into the buffing out operation anyway. I don't want to rush this. I want to take my time. The reason a tip weight box is a good thing to always try first is, hey, if you go through, put some more paint on it, it's not a problem. You're going to have tip weight out there anyway. You make a mistake or whatever. Now I'm using 1200 sandpaper. Where's the number? Anyway, it is 1200 sandpaper, the yellow back stuff. Oh, here, 1200. Microfine paper. Sikkens M600 in a little spray, just like we've done in the earlier videos. What you're trying to do now, because we're going to put more clear on top of this, you want to get this down to a matte dull finish. And it's good if you can, if you have another project to work on, let this dry an extra couple of days, maybe an extra week, even 2 weeks. The more it dries, the harder the paint gets, the easier it'll be to sand. Now what I'm trying to do is just show it. Now, main thing, we don't feel a line. Okay, that's fine. We have kind of a dull gloss. Now see up here, I want to show this. This is what we'll look at. These little pock marks. And we got little pock marks, and you'll usually get them right at the corners, right at the edge. Now I want to work on this little area here and get the pock marks out. You have to be real careful around the corners. Around the corners is where you tend to go through. $1,200. If you want to do this with 600, the only downside is in the final, absolute final sand out, you'll probably have little microscopic scratches that you probably won't even see. But anybody who's been around the custom cost circuit or the custom finishing circuit is going to see them instantly. Now let's see, did we get rid of them? Now you can see a little shiny spot right on the edge. What that shiny spot is where this dips down. We haven't cut into the clear there yet. Otherwise, this is a couple little dots in the corner here. And this is what you have to do. You have to just work on this. And I know this may get to be boring or whatever, but somewhere down the road you're going to want to have a buffed out plane, and at least I did anyway. And when you do, you're going to want the information, and you're going to want to have a little example of how to do it without, without going to a prisoner of war camp for 9 months. Okay, we've got rid of that. Now we have a totally dull up. See the corner here? A couple more in the corner. But we do basically have a dull flat. And again, remember, this takes time. This is time consuming. But when you're finished, believe me, you'll have something special. You won't just have another one of those run-of-the-mill, look like a piece of linoleum finish on your plane. You'll have something really nice. Again, you have to be careful. You don't go through the corners. And I look around, see I'm going into the blue already. So maybe I have to quit here for this. We're going to put more clear on top of this anyway. But this is what's called a sand out. Now this is what I would do to the first coat of clear that's on there. Just sand it out. Since we're using prep soil, it kills off all the fingerprints. you can get a little feel for what the finish on that looks like. And of course now we'll go test a few other parts, the little rudder, the gear doors or whatever. And for the rest of the day, we don't have much left in this day. The rest of the day I'm going to try just block sanding up what other pieces. Now one of the problems we had, and this is I want to mention this so maybe you can avoid this when you do your plane. We had to put some high penetrating thinner in this clear, and what happened, because the high penetrating thinner went down and loosened up some of these silver ink lines, what I'm going to do now is just sand off the ink lines and touch up the little spots that are bad. I never had this problem before, but then I never had to use the high penetrating thinner. When you're going to use high penetrating thinner, I think the better choice here might have been to wait for a day with less humidity. If you're going to use silver ink lines, only use them with non-penetrating thinner, 3608S. That'll save you. Now, obviously, another choice is we could go back and touch up these ink lines, do them over. But for right now, I'm just going to sand them off and touch it up with the airbrush. Okay, what I did, I sanded down this flap, and using the airbrush, now I use Midgley's little airbrush to touch up. Now, I like to touch up with an airbrush. Touching up with an airbrush is not a problem, but as far as painting big areas on a plane, it is a problem, because you don't really get a lot of good chemical and mechanical adhesion. Again, remember, anytime you paint with an airbrush, if you're going to put masking tape on top of it, it may or may not be a problem, because you don't really get that good adhesion when you use an airbrush. So you have to take that into account. Okay, now this is one of the most important phases of any clear job. We have this clear. It's been drying for 2 days now. I've done a little test. It looks like it's going to be fine. But because we used high penetrating thinner in this clear, everything, these silver ink lines have tended to molt away, and it still seems a little tacky. Now normally if you use 3608S, 2 days later it's like iron. This is still a little soft, so rather than using the 1200, what I'm going to do is try to cut this with 600. I did the one flap. I wanted to touch it up. What I did, I just sanded the ink lines right off and then touched it up with an airbrush. I want to get a feel for how good this is going to sand before I actually go and do the mainframe. And it may be that after doing a flap, I'm going to have to maybe wait another 2 or 3 days on this. I don't know. I have the M600 in a spray bottle. And I just want to show a little bit of, now cutting down these first coats of clear. What I really have is 2 wet coats of clear. But the problem here is the thinner. Because it was so humid yesterday and so cold, what happened is the paint, rather than being rock hard today, is a little on the soft side. So I'm just going to go down here now. You have to keep the paper wet. There's no way you can avoid using a gallon or so of this. There's no way you can save the wear and tear on your hands either. The last time I tried to use rubber gloves, I was kind of unsuccessful. The stuff gets right through the rubber gloves. But I'll pick out about 1/3 or so of the flap. Okay, dry it up with a paper towel. The thing is to flush away all the material that you've sanded off. Okay, now I want to look at this on a macro lens and show a few things. This will be a good sample. Okay, here's a good sample of the sand. We just saw our sand on camera. Now we get out here. Now notice we're getting into that pebbly, and this is unsanded paint. There's all little pits when you look at it real close. You get down here, it gets semi-pebbly where the sandpaper just came to an end, and now you have flat sanded area. Now if you hold this up to the light, and I don't know that you're going to get this on a macro, you can see it's a flat surface. Okay, now you can see the pits. This is in paint. This is the way lacquer normally dries, even dope. It's called orange peel. And here's a semi-sanded section of orange peel. Here's a section that's sanded. When it's flat like this, it's matte flat. Then you have a part where you've sanded down the mountain tops here, and then you have a part where you can still see the orange peel. So these are the 3 stages. Now what we're going to do is go take this whole flap, take this whole flap and put it into a matte finish. And any spots we go through now, this is why we have the airbrush. The airbrush is excellent for doing touch-up, because the touch-up we're not going to put tape on top of. Okay, we got a little airbrush set up with the blue. Okay, got the whole flap sanded down. Now you can see some of the spots, like right here, I've gone through. That's okay. Just go over, get the airbrush, and just touch the spots up. I always wipe this down with the M600. I just want to do the spots now, just the touch-up spots. Now what's good, an airbrush lets you get all the light spots where you've gone thin in a candy apple. It gives you one easy way of filling in all the light spots. Just remember, that's an important lesson. If you're going to use the silver ink lines or the Pilot pens, then you pretty much limit yourself to not having any penetrating thinner in the clear. Or spray it really dry. Now I'll put these touch-up spots on, and I'll wait a day or so and then give this another coat of clear. But I really want this to dry out. This paint really is on the verge of being too soft right now. But you know, we've had so many problems with the house and so many problems with Karen's operation that I'm kind of behind the 8 ball now, and I have to kind of make up some time here. Okay, always, whenever you do a touch-up, always do the edge too, because the edges are what's going to wear out. Somewhere down the road, that edge is going to wear out for sure. Okay, we just put this guy aside to dry now. Put a little wire in there. Now we test sanded out the elevators and the rudder, just to get a feel for how soft or hard this paint is. From the looks of this, we're going to go over to the tail and try. We'll start at the tail and work our way up to the front. The reason being that we have extra clear on the lettering and on the canopy, and on the back here we've tried to keep the clear to a minimum, so you think this would be dry now and be pretty much ready to be sanded. We'll give it a little try. Now anytime you spray over lines here, we put extra clear. Now we want to flatten this out, so when you rub your finger over this you can't feel it at all. That's what the goal of this is going to be. And the yellow only has one coat of clear. Remember, we put the minimum amount of yellow on here. So what we're going to do is very, very carefully sand this out. And especially when going over the yellow, so we don't run the risk of going through. Well, if we do go through, we go through in as few spots as possible. Now I want to tell you an absolutely true story. This is not funny either. What I did yesterday, I mixed some of this clear. You see the jar? It's a chopped garlic jar. Well, of course I cleaned it. I cleaned it with lacquer thinners, wiped it all out. But I mixed my paint now. And I also mixed, I don't know what's happening here. I've got all kind of garlic jars all of a sudden. You know, I pull these jars from wherever I can get them. This is absolutely true. Now I mixed this. You would think I mixed clear in here, cleaned it with thinner, and I sprayed this. And I'll tell you, when you start sanding a plane, I swear to God, it smells like garlic. It's not funny. But anyway, this. I know you're going to think this is funny, or I'm making this up like just to be cute. I'm going to make a suggestion here. Don't use garlic jars. I'll tell you what, when I'm sanding this plane, I swear to God, I can smell like garlic. Now, I went so far as to call John DeTavio, who's really a professional chef or a cook or whatever the heck he is. Who the heck knows what he is anyway? And I said, what's the story? And he says, sometimes you get garlic on your hands or on a pot or a spoon or something. It doesn't go away for months. So anyway, let's just hope this, let's hope this smell goes away by the time the appearance point the plane. Or, I don't know, or else hope we have Italian judges something for appearance judges. Maybe we get Mussolini to judge, who knows. Anyway, I'm going to start sanding it. Just thought I'd pass that on. Unless you're a garlic freak, don't use garlic jars. And you know, hey, another important point here, as long as we're trying to share information, this is how you learn. You don't learn by going to the library or going to college or Yale or, you know, wherever. You have to learn. And this is how you learn. When your table looks like this, and everything in your shop's a mess, and you're tired, and your arms hurt, and your sandpaper's all worn out, well, then you have some knowledge you can pass on. None of this is available in college. I don't care where you go. This is the school of drippy paint and garlic-smelling planes. Anyway, this may turn out to be the plane's nickname. You know, all these planes have a nickname, and this guy maybe eventually get to be known as Mr. Garlic or something. I don't know. Anyway, for what that's worth, I'm passing it on. I'm going to start my sanding. Now what I like to do is work one panel at a time, one surface of one panel, and just knock it all down to a matte finish. Now this panel here, the reason I'm doing this first is, had a problem yesterday with, we had 4 or 5 people in the shop here and somebody bumped into this. I won't mention any names. One of our good friends and customers banged him. I can see where he banged into it too, right here along the stripes. So I won't mention any names. I'll just send him a bill. Now you'll see when you start really breaking through the edges, and what happens is you break through the paint edges, that the sandpaper will either start to turn yellow or purple or whatever color the edge is. But you got to kind of monitor it with your finger, because if you go through with 600, you go through relatively quickly. And if you go through in a few spots, well, hey, not the end of the world. We have those little bottles of touch-up paint. But we're going to work one panel at a time. And normally what I would do is, because this is the back of the plane, I really want to get every single bit of clear up. I'll actually sand till I start going through, and then do a little touch-up, and then I know I really have the minimum amount of paint on here. Now that's another advantage too of having tune pipe planes is, in the days before tune pipe planes, the paint would literally wear out from wiping the plane off. Now you really don't have that problem. Plane gets waxed once a week. You really don't have a lot of goop to wipe off of it. Okay, now see, let's get on the macro lens here. You can see the sandpaper residue is starting to turn yellow. Okay, if we kind of, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this on the macro lens. The residue that's on here is yellow, so we know we're picking up the edge, and I cannot feel the edge now, and I can run my hand right over that. You don't feel a thing. Now another couple of tips and hints here. If you're starting this for the first time, you better get down and trim all the fingernails off. A fingernail can do more damage. If you wind up with fingernails or whatever, any jewelry you have, anything can really cause a problem. So anyway, this phase of it, you really have to take a little extra time. You really have to put a little energy into this. Now it's starting to get to be labor intensive, sanding intensive. But we want to knock this down just like we did with the flap. Get it perfectly dull, get out all the little scratches and everything. And if we start going through, what we'll do is set up the airbrush so that we can just touch this up in an ongoing basis. And we know we don't have a pile of extra paint on a tail here. And I suspect that this plane, because we did a little projection on a CG, we just sure don't want to wind up with extra paint back here at the tail. We have some up on the wing of the nose, not the end of the world. But I don't want to wind it. First off, the tail started out being 1/4 of an ounce heavier than I wanted it, because we don't have any more good wood in this shop here, any more really good wood. And that cheap Midgley's too cheap to send me down some good wood, so wait till he comes down here. I'm going to glue lead to his ribs or something. Anyway. Okay, I think you can get the idea that we're sanding across. We're not sanding with it, kind of across in a circular motion. We're knocking it down until you cannot feel the ridges. That's the point at which you stop. And you know, obviously it does no good to sand all the paint off. You have to know when to stop. So if I show one sequence here of how much to sand, you'll always break through the edges. You can almost guarantee these edges are going to get broken through. Now here's the telltale sign that you're starting to go through in spots. Now if you can see this, the paper towel's turning yellow already. So we kind of have to put the kibosh on this now. I don't know if you can see this on the Macklins. You can see, yeah, now you can. Okay, let me get right here. You see this gouge here? This was put in by a person soon to be unnamed. Walked right into the tail of the plane yesterday with a belt buckle when it was hanging from the lead outs. Now normally if this plane wasn't tail heavy already, I would block sand this all free and just fill it in with clear. Because it's already tail heavy, I don't want to add any weight back here. So I'm just going to sand as much as I can. I'm doing this by feel now. Anytime I can't feel the edges, it's quit time. Can't feel a thing. Smooth. Now you can see the difference in the finish. See, that's a kind of a glossy. This is kind of a matte finish. I don't know if you can see this. See the little shiny edges on the edges here? You want to sand until they all go away, and then you know you have it all. Once this is in full flat matte finish, and it's dry, I guess we'll let it dry a week or so or whatever, it'll be ready to buff out. Now it doesn't mean we can't put more clear on. Back here we want to have the minimum amount of paint though, that's for sure. But if you get used to looking for this matte flat finish, these are little divots, little Grand Canyons. Once you can identify that, you have a real good shot at getting that perfect finish. Now you can see a couple of spots where the yellow's starting to get thin here. This is perfectly smooth. And you see a couple of spots like this. Now see the little chunk, that little chunk there. So what we're going to do, and there's a couple of rough edges here and whatever. Go over at this point in time, open up all the touch-up bottles, and as we, on an ongoing basis, we'll touch it up as we go. Okay, I have the stab, top and bottom, and the whole fuselage knocked down into nice flat matte finish. And I'm going to start on the wing. Now the wing, because the wing has the most clear of all, with the lettering and everything, I've saved that for last, and I'll do one panel at a time. In fact, I probably won't even get to finish one tonight, but I'll work on one, and hopefully tomorrow finish up the wing panels. And then I'll have to go around and do a touch-up. Any little spots you go through, and we've gone through a few. In fact, you can see I touched up a spot on the tail here. It's normal to go through because you don't have all the clear on yet. You don't have all the finish, but the more of it you can get off now, the smoother and flatter you can make this, the more ahead of the game you'll be. And because we're trying to get every bit off behind the CG, you know, I've gone through a few spots on the tail here and just touch them up with the airbrush. Just get out the little airbrush, touch them up. And the lettering, you really have to take your time around the lettering. That's where it's going to put the most of the time right now will be spent around the lettering. So I'll work on this another half hour tonight and 45 minutes, and we'll come back to this tomorrow. Now, yesterday I managed to finish the whole top of the wing, and today I'm starting up on the bottom here with the sanding. You really get some nice broad shoulders and big biceps. Well, you get one big bicep doing it this way anyway. But just to make a long story short, I'm going to try to finish this today. I have a machine shop day coming up. I'll try to finish this today, so at the end of this day I have the whole plane sanded out. And I'll have one arm like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Anyway, and then we'll get back on this. No point putting any more on video. It's just a redundancy. And then we'll get back to the touch-up phase. Get back, touch everything up with the jars, with the airbrush, and get ready to put the last coat of clear on. Now today, I want to go over the work I did yesterday on this, none of which is particularly significant. I had the camera out on loan doing a train show. Got the camera back early this morning, and I want to go over what we did. Yesterday, you can see some of the spots are shiny on this. What I did, I outlined with black India ink all the letter sets, all the gold letters. I had sanded this down the day before to where it was all in flat mode, and I guess you can still see the nose here is still flat. And now what I want to mention, and this is an important, the canopy's all nice and smooth now. What I want to mention now, a very important concept in putting the clear on a plane. When you're looking to put the clear on, and in our case we're trying to keep as much behind the CG to the minimum, and we don't really care about the nose, but we do want to bury these gold letters, really bury them in some clear. So what we have to do is carefully figure out exactly how and where we want to put the clear on. We want to bury the bird in clear. So what I did, I had the whole plane knocked down into flat, absolutely flat, and you can see this is still flat with 600 paper. I gave it an extra day to dry, and then I selectively put on the clear. Now this is with non-penetrating thinner always. I went over all the ink lines here, and these I just had applied with a pen. Went over all the surfaces. I have the surfaces out there drying. Now remember, these only have one coat of clear. We're trying to keep that center of gravity down to a minimum. The cowling has only one coat of clear because we're going to put a coat of Imron on the cowling. The tip weight box should be drying, and that's our little test to buff things out. Now you can see up in the nose here where we have a little, whatever you want to call them, poopsie I guess. You can see I selectively sprayed on yesterday before I left an extra coat of clear. Now what I'm going to do every day now for the next couple of days, and I won't bother putting it all on the video, just mention how we do this, is every day now for the next 3 or 4 days I'm going to sand this down when I get in the shop in the morning with 600, get it nice and flat, and put an extra coat of clear on top of it. Same thing with the letters. Now I want to have, when I'm finished here, 8-10 coats of clear on the letters, but not on the blue. I don't need 10 coats on the blue. I need a lot over the letters here. I need a little over the striping, but I don't need 10 coats on the leading edge. I don't need 10 coats in here. So what it is, the amount of clear that I'm going to put on a plane, I'll be putting on very selectively. One of the areas that takes an awful lot, anywhere there's the little microflakes, you need a lot. Anywhere you have your little letters, you need to have extra clear covering them up. And in our case, see, everything that's yellow in the back of the plane, we're only going to have one coat on. And don't think, I mean, for a minute that you're going to get by with just spraying clear. And here's where people go wrong. They take the clear and they just spray the whole plane like it was painting a house or something. And what happens is too much of it goes behind the CG. Not enough of it goes onto all the little emblems and all the little letter sets. And when you're talking about a 7-ounce finish, 3 ounces of it is clear. Maybe, you know, some people even put 4 ounces or 5 ounces. I don't know. Mike Rogers, I'm sure, has 5 ounces on his plane. But what happens is you start decoupaging up areas of a plane that don't need to be decoupaged. I mean, there's places like just the blue along the leading edge here. It doesn't need 10 coats of clear. But these stripes do, and these little shields do, and all these little spots around the canopy do. These letter sets, I've already sanded through on them. Now what I did when I sanded through these little letter sets, I just went by, put another coat on top. Now today I'll do the same thing. Very carefully sand them down, go over, put a couple more coats of clear on. But keep in mind what we're trying. I'm just trying to, you know, and obviously every plane's out. I'm trying to give you the idea of how I do this to keep the weight to a minimum. It's selective application of the clear. It's not like you just take the whole plane and bathe it in clear or decoupage it or whatever. That's definitely not what we do. It's carefully put on areas that need 10 coats, get 10 coats. Areas that only need one, need one. And now another thing too, and I know my own, you know, my last year's concourse plane was 54 ounces, legit 54 ounces. And it had plenty of finish on it. But it had 10 coats on the letters, and it had 1 coat on the tail. If you go back and look at all those old videos, you can see it was a pretty nice finish. Here's the problem. You have to put the clear on in a very unequal manner. And what I've done here, just to go back, is I sprayed the whole 2/3 of the material are already on the plane. And now this last 1/3 I'm going to put on selectively. I'm going to find all the little spots I've sanded through. And don't think for a minute that I haven't sanded through. There's 8-10 spots on this that I've sanded through into the yellow. When I see I've gone through the yellow or gone through the blue, what do? Take a wild guess. We have our little bottles. Just mask off the area, dust in a little bit, and shoot a little clear on. Right up into the point where you're going to dust, where you're going to sand the whole plane down. In other words, the last step on this is going to be, we're going to take 1200 and sand the whole plane down with 1200. The 1200 doesn't remove a lot of material, but it'll get out all the little final flaws in the finish. So for right now, just, you know, this is really, I guess, secret is not the right word, but there's definitely a misconception of how to apply clear. And if you think that you just take the plane, chalk it up on the old finishing wheelbarrow or finishing friend and blow on a gallon of clear, big mistake. To get the finish light and still have it pretty and still have it light enough and yet durable enough, when you want to meet all those qualifications, the clear has to go on very selectively. You almost have to make a map, I guess similar to this, only I do it in my mind, of how it is that you want to put the clear on this plane. There's areas you need a lot on, there's areas you need very little. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to selectively go by all the spots that the nose is one, the gold lettering, the canopy, the letraset areas under the canopy here. Selectively go by with 600 paper and the M600 and sand these areas out very carefully. Now, when I go to sand around these inclines only have 1 coat of clear, so all I'm going to do is dull it out, flatten it out. I'm not going to try to go down and grind out the gold or anything like that. As soon as I see the least little hint that I'm losing an incline, I have to stop. Very, very light sanding at this point till I get 2 or 3 coats of clear on here. Same thing on the nose. As soon as I see I've gone through an incline, I have to back right down. This in itself will save you weight on the plane because right now you're removing a lot of material. At the same time you're making the plane lighter, making the finish better, all at the same time. And there's labor involved. This is not easy or fun. I mean, this is 2 or 3 days I'm going to be picking away, and it's those 2 or 3 days that move you up from the 15-point row or whatever up into the front row, in my opinion. It's the little extra time you spend picking away, putting the extra clear on. And by the way, it doesn't add the weight because you're removing material. Every time you sand the plane, you're making it lighter and better at the same time. It's just the labor that's involved you have to kind of deal with. Now just to show, this is one spot, all the gold letters here, when I was sanding the clear, they got too thin and I start taking the edges off the letters. Those have been touched up. I just put new letters right on top of the old ones. It's not a problem. Spray a couple of coats of clear and get on with it. All the lettering now has a number .80 incline around it, and you notice when I laid out the letters I wanted to have all straight lines, so this becomes a relatively easy job. All of the letrasets. Now I can tell, let's see if I can find a little dent here on the lens. You'll see there are, even in the most careful of jobs, I'll try to find one here, where you have a letra dent. Let's see if we can find one. Yeah, here's one right here. Okay, that's going to be very easy to fix because it says the outboard wingtip. So you can see how it's a little dent here and a little dent here. Very easy to fix. This is the outboard tip. Who cares if it has 100 coats of clear? So back here, it's no problem at all. Keep sanding it down and building up the clear in this last 3 inches. Who cares? It's just going to be less lead you have in a wingtip. But on the inboard tip, the opposite is true. If we have a little letra dent, it's probably going to stay there. We're not going to build it up with clear. Now, the little shield that we did, we went through in a couple little high spots, typically around the edge. You need to go get the ink pen and just touch up the edge. Put a couple of more coats. You can see, in fact, here, if we get this back on the lid, you can see the shininess. We have a couple of coats of clear on that extra. The gold lettering, the same thing. Couple extra coats of clear, but just on the lettering. Up here, I don't need 10 coats. I just need it on the lettering. We refogged in the canopy last night. I had gone through the edge, and you'll always go through the edge of these flakes. The flakes are just a pain, which, by the way, is the reason I ink the edges, because you always get ratty edges with, with these microflakes. They stick up so high. So around the canopy again, I sanded it down, just masked it off, touched it up with an airbrush. Back of the tail, I went through here, I touched it up. I went through back here, there was kind of a little ratty spot. I'm trying to remember now, there was a spot on the bottom too. Somewhere you can see where I've gone over just the letrasets with the clear. Just the letrasets. Now I use 1/3 of the material to do this, just go over the letraset stuff. And the ink lines. And well, I'm trying to find that spot. Well, it's under there anyway. I'll flip it over anyway. You can see that I've just gone over the shield with the clear. Just gone over the bird. Quaalude bird just has 1 extra coat of clear. The lettering. Out here, this tip will not get any extra clear except maybe 1 extra coat over the lettering. Okay, so if you have that concept down, that's worth the price of the video just to get the concept that you don't take clear and just put it on equally. That's a super important concept. If you want to do planes that aren't overweight and make it up into that front row, I mean, the goal of this whole thing is to start off flying and not handicap yourself with appearance points where Joe Blow gets 19 points and you get 15. I want to start off being the guy with 19. Then we'll worry about it. That's my philosophy. I always want to start with maximum appearance points. Another thing, too, that I had a problem with this already that may not be obvious is by using the high penetrating thinner in some of the clear coats, what's happened is this paint is exceptionally soft and hard to sand. And it would be really to everybody's advantage, my advantage especially, if over the weekend this just sits and dries. When I come back to it Monday, it still won't be buffed out. But and again, if you just right now get some patience or go do something else, we may later today or over the weekend work on this other gold guy. The gold guy maybe spend a day, do the canopy and do some of the layout of the trim or whatever I'm going to do on him. I haven't really decided yet. But anyway, just putting this guy aside for a while, when you have that penetrating thinner in there and the paint is soft, the time you put it aside for, I know it's hard to just put something aside, but it really does pay off. Alright, so we're going to get ready, start sanding some of these little areas out, try to get some of this on the video. But remember, like the nose, I guess we'll do the nose first. We'll sand it out, let it sit, and the last thing of the day, put another coat of clear on it. Sand the letters out, let it dry all day, put a coat of clear on, come back tomorrow. And we can go back over maybe 4 or 5 times before we actually have that you can't feel anything on the letters. It's perfectly smooth. And at that point in time, then we have to put it aside maybe for a week or so before we actually buff it out. But what I can do is the other little parts, again, the tip weight boxes, gear doors, cowlings, all that kind of stuff, I can be working on that at the same time. Again, that's that time management thing where I'm always trying to work it that I have something to work on and something's drying. Something to work on, something's drying. And in this case, if all else fails, and we finish up with this guy, and we still have some hours to work today, we'll go get the gold guy and work on him. Now we can start today, oh God, old bodies. We can start today again. We only have to sand now the parts that we're going to be going over. And we can do this one little piece at a time. If I happen to go through and see an ink line or a white edge come through, well, no sweat, no problem. Just go get the ink pen. In fact, we'll leave the ink pen and all the touch-up stuff out here. We'll touch this up as we go along. When we're all finished, the last thing of the day, I'll spray a coat of clear on everything. Using 600 paper and the M600. Try to keep it neat. From this point on, I don't want to turn the plane into a sloppy thing. So one little area at a time. Now the lettering is even a more tricky thing because I don't want to go through the ink. The ink is a problem, and I don't want to touch it up. I just want to get this basically just flattened down again. And I'll get the next coat on here. Remember I had those bad little spots, little letter dents out here on the outboard tip. Again, I can put that outboard tip, I can just go crazy and put as much decoupage it. You can turn that outboard tip into a where you don't even need tip weight. The elevators only have one coat of clear, and because they only have one coat of clear, while we're waiting for this to dry, I may just go over there and see how hard that paint is. Maybe I can do the 1200 sanding on it and see if that part of the plane, because we haven't gone over and over it with clear, that part may be ready to buff today. But again, when you get the last coat of clear on, then for sure you want to put it aside to dry for a couple of days, at least a weekend. The longer the better. And this is the part of the job, it just takes time. This is just hours of labor. And if you're willing to put the hours of labor in, it's almost guaranteed you'll get that really great result. If you're not willing to spend the time, it almost guarantees you will not get good results. And you will be starting off in whatever row you happen to be in. But if you start in the front row, you start with maximum points, then it's up to whoever it is to come and catch you. I think you're always better off in the front row, regardless of what Ted says about planes not being important to have a nice shiny plane. To me, it's the single most important thing, is have that plane be perfect and let everybody sit back and be impressed and then worry about it. Alright, so we're just going to go back, do the other areas. We can do a lot of these off camera. There's no point making this an all-night affair here. But we're looking to block sand it down, get it as flat as possible. You know what this shows you, these little shiny spots here, this is perfectly flat. Any of the little shiny spots, right here you can see a shiny spot, it means we still need one more coat of clear, because when this is finished I want a matte finish over the whole thing. Let's go up here and see if we've made any progress. We really didn't sand this much. After maybe 2 more coats of clear, I'll get in here and really sand this down to a matte, flat finish. We had that bad spot on the trailing edge right here. We can kind of fill that in with clear right now. And you can see now we're really not hitting the butt. These are like little rivers here. We're not really filling them in yet. It's going to take 2 or 3 more coats of clear before I can really go crazy and sand this out. Now at this point we want to go all around and make sure we touch up all the spots where we've gone through, and this is a good spot to use the airbrush. Just one of many spots, and I'll just keep looking at this and find all the spots. Then I'm going to go back with the ink pen and touch up the ink lines. Now what I want to do is pick through here. There's a couple of spots where the ink lines went through. Just going to get out the ink pen and touch them up. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go over and take my last little bit of clear and add about 20% extra thinner, 3608S, and just put a gloss top coat on top of this. Just one thin wet coat, and that'll finish off the clear. Now I take the thin pen, and I just start one letter at a time, trying to pick out the spots. Now some letters don't have any errors in them. The A has a little spot. What happens? All the little high spots get knocked down and the ink comes off. So what you do, the easiest way I know of, is just go letter to letter, touch it up as you go along, and each time you'll be knocking down the high spots, so the next time around hopefully you'll have less and less, up to the last point where you'll have none. Now we may put, because we're putting ink on this, we'll put one extra coat of clear. Get rid of some of the sandpaper. We'll get one extra coat of clear on top of the whole thing before we finalize it, and then put that last wet coat on. I mixed up the paint for the wet coat, roughly 20% extra thinner. But again, I'm trying to get away with using 3608S. If I have to go to the high gloss thinner, it means it's going to have to take an extra couple of days to dry out. Something I really don't need right now. I don't need another delay. If you just go down one letter at a time, you'll be able to pick out all the spots. Then what I do is take the whole ruler right across the top and right across the bottom and try to get an edge. Because an edge is something you don't really see. And yet you will notice it. It isn't a thing that's obvious, but you'll notice it in the final job. And you see another spot here. And this is, again, let's look around at the bird, make sure, yep, a couple of spots we went through on the bird. We could redo his eye here while we have the ruler out. Straight line his eye a little bit. What happens, all the little high points tend to come off when you do this. And I guess out of the whole job, the only thing I was kind of disappointed with was the thickness of the ink lines. A little spot up on the canopy here too. The thickness of the silver ink lines didn't coordinate with anything, so they're gone. And that's an important thing to realize, is when you do a piece of artwork, you don't know what it's going to look like when it's finished. Halfway through, you may change your mind and say, that yellow is not yellow enough. That canopy needs to be blue. Or it's okay to change your mind halfway through a job. It's not like you have some big commitment. Now, I've already changed from the original drawing. I wanted to have orange letters, and I abandoned that for the gold. It's okay to change your mind. We started out wanting to do thick ink lines, thin ink lines, which turned into thick ink lines because we couldn't get the pen to work exactly the way we wanted to. And it was a weekend day. I didn't want to lose a whole day running up to the art supply store. And this is just a thing where you have to be fussy. You have to pick out all the little mistakes. Each time you sand it clear, there'll be little spots where you sand through. It's almost inevitable. Mostly where you'll have problems with the ink lines is in the corners. Now I would spend a little bit extra time on the top. I'll maybe spend a half hour on the top letters and 10 minutes on the bottom letters. I want the top to be a lot more meticulous than the bottom. Now I still have that 1/3 of that clear to spray on here. Roughly 1/3, and I want to get one wet coat, hopefully not even use up all the clear, because I'm not going to do a lot on the yellow. I'm going to give that the thinnest coat on the planet. And when we go to weigh this in the final at the end, let's see if all this paid off. If it winds up that we haven't added more than 3 ounces of clear, we have mission accomplished. If we added 5 ounces, back to square one. And then don't be afraid to just go back and forth over the incline. Inclines are a pain in the neck, everybody knows it. As you put the clear on with high penetrating thinner, they tend to get washy and they don't hold their edge, but right now for the final coat you can touch them up. Here's a typical thing. I just noticed a little spot on the trailing edge. This is just a typical thing that always happens as you break through an edge. When you break through an edge, I have the little brush out. In fact, I already have the blue already out. Just come by and touch it up. That's why I like to keep the touch-up paint out most of the time I'm doing this, because as I'm walking around this, I can spot little spots like that. Now, when you brush on a little bit like this, in the last coat of clear, it'll kind of melt right in. It's nice if you can get the touch-up underneath the clear. If you have to do this on top of the clear, and what I'm saying is when we buff out the clear, then we'll only use the airbrush to touch it up, and they'll just be little postage stamp size repairs wherever we go through. Right now, a little spot in here I don't like either. Any spot you don't like right now, you can just hit with the brush, that's fine. And they will typically be on the edges. And again, it's the points, the little points. If you take the fine point pen and get all the points accurate, straight line out all the edges. Okay, we're all set to spray. We mixed up our material, and what we want to do is now just go over the letters, all the things that are going to need 2 coats. And when that dries up, then we'll put that final coat on. Again, we'll get an extra double coat on the letters. Anything that has ink lines, I want to have an extra coat on. We do have a little bit of this material left over. I'll put it on the top of the outboard wing. Hopefully won't need as much tip weight then. We'll find out. Again, try not to get any material we don't need behind the CG. Keep that to a minimum. Trailing edge always gets an extra coat. That's one area that always seems to take a beating. Anyway, there's a letraset. system's working good today. There's not much humidity in the air, and the chop vanc's pulling out all the smoke, all the overspray. Now all the clear has been sprayed on the ship, and we're giving it 2 or 3 days to harden up here. We'll put it up in a rack and we'll work on something else. But before we start working on our next project, what I want to do is go over a little bit of what we're going to try to do when we try to buff this guy out. Buffing him out, it seems to be a mystery to a lot of people what buffing out entails. So let me just try to document or put on this video what it is I've found to be true about buffing. Maybe you can use that information, put it to good use in your projects. Now this is a word, buffing, rubbing out, that it's not quite clear to a lot of people exactly what we're trying to accomplish. All lacquer, if you were to look at lacquer the way it dries, what it would look like would be this. If you look at it under a microscope, this is called orange peel. Okay, orange peel is a word you have to try to get used to. Now, what happens if you spray dry, and everybody knows dope, for instance, seems to dry like this. Dope is absolutely the worst of all worlds, especially where the wing joins the body. You know, in here it turns into 80 grit sandpaper. Okay, what's happening is you have exaggerated orange peel. Okay, if we were painting something made out of metal, fiberglass, you could eliminate a lot of the orange peel by using a high gloss thinner, and then it would dry similar to that. Okay, what we're trying to accomplish, the whole purpose of buffing, is to accomplish a flat surface. Perfectly flat. Now, anybody that knows anything about jewelry, a diamond or gold or anything, it shines because light hits it and it bounces back in one plane. It reflects light. When you look at this surface, it reflects light only off this surface, only off here, and only off here. In this case, it only catches the tip of the mountain at a microscopic level. So the flatter you can make the surface, the flatter you can make it, the more reflection you're going to get, the more mirror. I'll call it mirror for lack of a better word. The more reflective power you're going to get, the flatter you can make the surface on a microscopic level. Think of a diamond. What a diamond is a rock that has flat surfaces ground into it. Now let's just pretend this, whatever the shape is, but it's all flat surfaces. They're all reflecting light at the same time. It's why an I-beam plane, when it has the ribs looking like this, there's always some area reflecting light, or a built-up wing reflects light a lot better than a foam. A foam wing only reflects light in one dimension. Okay, now this might sound like a contradiction in terms, but it's not. If you go and take a foam wing and buff it out, and you take an I-beam wing or a rib wing and buff it out, what happens is the rib wing never stops reflecting light. No matter what angle you put it at, there's a surface that's catching light and throwing it back. So try to understand what we're trying to do by buffing. Buffing means we're trying to establish, we want to turn that mountainous, whatever level of mountainousness you have, into a flat surface. That's the purpose of buffing. Okay, mechanically what you're trying to do is there's several ways to do this. Let's exaggerate a little bit. If you were to just compound only, and just compound over a surface, you would eventually wear the mountaintops down, and then the next time each time you did it, it would look a little bit better, but it would be extremely time consuming. A better way is if we sand it down, and the prime material here is 1200 sandpaper and Sikkens M600. By using that material, you get a very quick cut at the mountaintops. Chop, chop, chop. In 3 or 4 swipes of the paper, you have it down to where the mountaintops look like this. Now, you can really take some material away. What happens if you use 600 paper? 600 paper will work also. But what happens with 600 paper is the surface looks like this. You have sanding scratches. And now these scratches you either have to buff out with the buffing material, or you have to go back with 1200 now and try to get the scratches out. 1200 doesn't leave scratches, or leaves very few. It only leaves scratches where you build up an extra amount of material. So, starting with our surface, before we actually buff this plane, step 1 is to let it dry. Lacquer, couple days, 3 days, 5 days, a week maybe the most, before it's ready to buff. Dope, 6 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks if you've used a very low amount of thinner. If you use any high penetrating thinner, extra time. Okay, so let it dry. Step 1, let it dry. We put it up in a rack, let it sit there for a couple days. Go work on another project. Maybe today we'll go work on the gold guy for a while, or we'll clean the shop, or empty the shop vac, or read some Playboy magazines or something. Or find something to do. Don't get impatient. So the first step in this case, because this is a lacquer finish, we're going to have this surface. We're going to cut it all down with 1200 sandpaper until it's dull. 1200 sandpaper is what we're going to use. We're going to knock the mountaintops off. Then we're going to do compounding. Now, compounding is no different than sanding. The difference is you could have, let's say, 400 sandpaper, 600 sandpaper, 1200. Sandpaper, by the way, goes up to 2000 grit. We don't really need 2000. I've tried that, and it just... the only guy I know that uses this is Ski Dombrowski, because he's tremendously fanatical about it. But for our purposes, 1200 seems to be the proper paper to use. 1200, and use it wet. If you use it dry, it's useless. You won't know which side you're sanding. The 1200 sandpaper. Now, once we get the surface flat with 1200, well, on a microscopic level, it still looks... there's little rivers and valleys and stuff. We need to go to the next denominator. The next denominator is compound. Red compound is the roughest, white, and Gorham's polish. And then wax. Carnauba. Okay, in this order. Now, if you were really an extremely fanatical person, you could go from 1200 paper, hit the surface with red. Red might or might not leave scratches, depending on the lacquer. White probably will leave very few, if any, scratches. Gorham's will leave none. Gorham silver polish is the best material I've ever found, short of using toothpaste or something that's very, very expensive. Toothpaste, by the way, works well too. But of course, a tube of toothpaste is a lot more expensive than Gorham's. And finally, when it's all dry, and never put wax. This is an important thing. Never put wax on a lacquer surface that isn't a couple of, let's say for dope it might be 3 months. For lacquer it might be 1 month, I don't know. Walt Prey probably knows these numbers better than I do. But what happens, wax seals the surface, and then it doesn't gas off any thinner. Wax is not a good thing to be having on a surface until it completely dries, hardens, cures, whatever you want to call that word. So, if you look at this scale, you can kind of see where we're going. We're going to wind up with sometimes, and now this is the method that I like to use, you can go from 1200 paper right to Gorham's if the stuff is hard enough. Okay, you can make this a 2-step process. Not always, but you can sometimes get away with it. Most of the time you'll wind up, and what I like to do is test the red, test the white, test the Gorhams, and see which one is going to give me the best shine. And that's why I use my little parts. I try the little parts out, see, take the tip weight box, try red, doesn't look so good, go to white, a little bit better, Gorham's looks the best. Okay, but if the white looked the best, okay, whichever material looked the best, go with that material. But always finish the job off with Gorham's. Gorham's always seems to be the best. Wait the 3 months, give it time to cure, give it plenty of time to cure before you wax it, and then go out and buy pure Carnauba. Now, you may buy Prestone or any of these other brands of wax, but the ingredient in wax that makes it shine and protects the finish is a thing called Carnauba. There's in Simonized, there's probably 1% Carnauba. In some of these other waxes, there's 2% or 3%. Go out and buy pure Carnauba wax. It's very expensive. It's about $30 a can, but when you wax the surface, it will be waxed. I mean, we're not waxing a van here. We're waxing an airplane. One can will typically last 10 years. So spend it, invest in some pure Carnauba. It's an excellent choice. Now there is one other step to this, and I'm just going to go over the steps before we go into this. Final Shine. Final Shine is a product that's made for custom car shows. It's made by 3M. It's sold in quart containers. What it is, it puts a temporary shine on things for 3 to 6 hours. It puts a false shine, not a real, what you would call a real shine. It does it by putting silicone on the surface. Final Shine is an excellent thing. After you finish with Gorham's, and you want to get an extra little buff on, or whatever you want to call it, because it's really a microscopic polish that's in there. There's a very fine polish in there. Right after Gorham's, if you put some Final Shine on, that thing is going to look and feel like unbelievable. It's really going to be good. This is a good combination, but this you can do anytime you want. I would wait to wax until that puppy is about at least a couple of months old before you go blowing on some Carnauba wax. Again, this is the DuPont, the red rubbing compound that I use. You can see it's kind of slimy and everything. You got to stir it up. The oil in there is the carrying agent that lets it must stay wet. You can't use this dry. You mix the oil that's in there in the can up, make a paste out of it, and get ready. Socks are an excellent thing to use, by the way. If you haven't seen the sock technique, we'll be showing that for sure. Anyway, that's the red compound. The white compound is a little bit finer grit. Again, you have to stir it up. It looks like, you know, like Jell-O or something in there. You need to stir the grit up. It's the grinding agent, the whatever you want to call it, the rough pumice stone or whatever they make this out of, that actually does the buffing and the polishing. Anyway, it's good to have those two things in stock. Now, this is what the Gorham silver polish looks like. You can see it's kind of a pasty liquid. You need to mix a little bit of water in with this when you use it, and it dries out right away. You need to keep wetting it down and keeping it wet. You want to keep this compound in suspension. That's the whole trick, to keep this. Don't buff it dry. Keep it in suspension. The other materials you're going to want to have are some 600 sandpaper. In this case, we're using Norton. And some microfine 1200 sandpaper. Now, you can see the microfine is sold in half sheets only. It's very fine. You almost can't tell which side to use unless you look at the label. The Norton, the 600, is a little rougher. You need a little bit more, it has a nice gritty feel to it. You need to sand these wet, though. If you use these sandpapers dry, they're almost useless. You'll wear them out instantly. Now, this is what I do when I get ready to buff a plane. I get out all my old socks, and if I don't have old ones, I make them old. I just volunteer 6, 8, 10 pair of socks. Nice woolly athletic kind of socks. Get out red compound, white compound, the Gorhams. Get out some 1200 sandpaper and some Sikkens M600, and you're pretty much ready to, once that chip dries out, you're pretty much ready to do your buffing job. Now here's just some do's and don'ts that I've found when you're going to buff one panel at a time. Now typically, if you go to sand the whole plane down, what's going to happen? You're going to either injure your arm, or the back of your neck is going to start to hurt from using all that energy on a muscle that you're normally not used to using. So what I traditionally do, it's a good idea to start on the bottom, or a flap, or an elevator, or something. In this case, in this year's plane, because I have yellow elevators and purple flaps, I'm going to start with an elevator. I'll take one elevator, knock it down with 1200, hit it with red, white, or Gorham, see what brings up the shine. One elevator. Now if it doesn't come up rather quickly or reasonably, and again that's a relative term, if it doesn't come up reasonably, what it means is you should wait. Don't start on the top of the outboard wing, because if you screw up or put a gouge or whatever, well, then I would start with the second elevator. That's a little better. Maybe we'll wait 2 more days. Wait, or whatever you have to do, wait for this flap. Get all the little part. Do the cowl if you're going to do the cowl. Now we're going to Imron the cowl, so we'll just do the compounding out and then spray over it with Imron. And then start on the bottom of the tail. Maybe do the bottom of the fuse. Save the bottom of the inboard wing, the bottom of but save the last thing you want to do. The last thing, because that gives you the most drying time, is the top of the outboard wing, top of the inboard wing. These are the things that are the focal points of the plane. The nose section, the top of the nose. When that plane is in appearance judging, these blackened areas are the areas that most people look at. The tail, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But this is the focal point of the plane. Picture this area right here is what everybody is going to see every time you lay the plane down in front of them. They're not going to see the bottom of the stab. They're not going to see the bottom of the elevator. They're not going to see the bottom of the wheel pans. But they are going to see, every time they walk by the plane, they're going to see this area. And if it has a cockpit, they're going to kind of look at the cockpit. So picture this top of this area. You want to be the last thing you buff, and you want it to be the best. And the way you do that is get all your practicing, all your fooling around and on the bottom and everything. And the last thing, do the top of the surface. And by doing that, you save the best for last. By the time you get to the top, your arm is going to be so sore anyway and tired and everything, but you'll have your technique down pat. You'll be working on a really quality finish, and you can get these 2 panels done last and the nose. That's an excellent way to do it. Now another thing, you go to appearance judging. The day you go to appearance judging, you get back from flying, you get over to the motel room. Well, now is the time to Windex the plane down. This is what I usually do. Windex the plane, get off all the old wax and goop and fuel. If you have a tune pipe plane, of course, you have a very little job. If you have a normal plane, you got to get in the cowling and everything. Anyway, Windex the plane down with Windex. Then I would take, the next step of this whole thing would be some final shine. That's going to give me 3 to 6 hours of silicone that's going to sit on the surface and be nice and shiny. And if you're really serious about this whole thing and you really want to go crazy, you get out that can of Carnauba. And now that Carnauba, that solid Carnauba, that is going to put, this combination will put a shine on there that is just unbelievable. And it'll stay that way probably for 3 to 6 hours, sometime overnight. But the Carnauba will protect it. The final shine will put the final, what the final shine really does, if you looked under a microscope, there's a little tiny scratch that you can't even see in a microscope. It fills this little thing with silicone. And it stays there on a semi-temporary basis, and then the Carnauba leaves a shine that you can't believe. The light reflection is unbelievable. And this is one of the secrets toward having a plane where there's 8-10 planes in the front row and one is just sparkling away and looking good. This is one of the tricks for doing that. Now I just want to show, when you do go down to buy wax, and you know everybody's tempted to buy these $3 waxes and all this cheap stuff, but look for this word, pure Carnauba. It's Carnauba that's actually the wax. You don't want any cleaner in it. You want pure Carnauba. And the Sunbright brand, this is a very expensive brand, by the way. Let's see what else it says on the can. I don't know, but every time you go to a custom car show, it seems like this is the brand that everybody likes to use. This and the final shine make for just an unbelievably nice finish. Now here's a couple of things that I put in a never category. These are things that I'm always tempted to do, but they never seem to work out. Never use alcohol to clean around lacquer, because if you get one drop of alcohol, it's going to act like fuel. It's going to make the paint white. It's going to destroy a perfectly good finish. Alcohol is a big no-no. M600, if you need to clean things, you need to prep a plane up for a repair, or just clean it up for a show, or if you're having a demo or whatever, M600 is what you want to use. Never alcohol, especially 91% alcohol, the stuff you use to clean solid lines on. M600 is always a better choice. Now, another thing, what I'm always guilty of doing, and I take pledge, and I'll go flying, and I'm too lazy to use the Carnubo or whatever, and I'll just take pledge and go pledge the plane down. Well, what happens after you pledge the plane? 6 or 8 times, it turns into a grease monkey, and you lose the shine. You've got to get the old pledge off with Windex. So what you really need to do is Windex and then pledge, and then you've restored some of the shine. Or like at these local contests, if they're going to have, most of our contests don't have appearance judging, just before appearance judging, if you run over and get the pledge, and the pledge in the brown can is the best. The stuff in the yellow can with the lemon is less good. The brown can of pledge, if you're going to wax in between flights or in between appearance judging or whatever, the pledge in a brown can is a thing I like to do little maintenance on. Alcohol, anytime I've gotten alcohol on a lacquer, it's really ruined it. It's made a mess out of it. So with all this in mind now, it just comes down to the part of being patient. We'll give this plenty of time to dry. When it comes time to buff things out, we'll run our little test on the little parts, just like we said in the video. And it's time to just let it sit. We'll work on some other projects for a little while. A couple of days anyway. Now what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take this part. I've sanded it down with 1200. Just as a little test to see how we stand on letting this paint. Since we painted it all pretty much on the same day, let's just see how this, if this tends to buff up nice. And we'll try to get some of this on a macro lens, of course. Let's just get a little look at what's happening here. Again, this is a time-consuming, labor-intensive part of the job. You know, most people try to rush it too fast. You really have to, when you get to this part, it's going to take X amount of hours, and there's really no way you can, you know, beat a dead horse and make it happen in a hurry. Now what I've done, this is, again, I'm just comparing, just to see the hardness of the paint. This is just with white compound. So let me just, let's see if we can get this on the video, get a little look at it. Okay, now by letting this dry a few days, you can see I've got a pretty good shine in a relatively short amount of time. Now this is not the best that this will ever shine. What I've done here is knock down all the mountaintops. The next step on this part, the next step is going to be, I'm going to go get some Gorhams and just see if I can bring that shine up even a little more, but no wax. I'll stop at the Gorhams at this stage. And this is just 1200 paper and white compound. And I'm going to try on some of the other little pieces, I'll try the 1200 paper and go right to the Gorham. Sometime you can leave out the step of the white polish. But you never know. Every paint is different. Every time you spray it's different. You really need to do a little test and just see what your finish looks like. Now if you really look close here, I don't know how close we can get on this macro lens. Let's see how close we can get. You can see there's some microscopic scratches. And again, I don't know if this is going to show on the final. There are some microscopic polishing. These are polishing scratches. These are things you don't get when you use Gorhams. You'll eliminate that part of it. Now, again, you can fill these in with final shine. Again, it's all a personal thing. From 3 feet away, you don't even see that. That's when you really want to be a fuss pot, a fanatic like Busso or Ski or whatever. But I'm trying to get the best shine I can within a reasonable amount of time. And then what I'll do is just before the Nationals, my program is always just before the gnats, whichever plane I decide I'm going to finally fly, and again I'll be building 2 planes, so whichever one I will fly, I'll take and polish that whole thing out a week or 2 before the gnats. Again, polishing this up, a lot of times a month later it'll dull out on you. If you rush this and try to polish it too fast, a month later it just goes flat dull and you have to do the whole job over again. So for whatever that's worth. Now I want to do a little test. Let's test this rudder piece out. I'm sanding it down with 1200. Now you notice I put the hinges in position when I'm sanding this so I don't get any high spots or low spots. You don't get the bow by the hinges after you epoxy them in. Keep it good and wet with M600. Now remember, we have only 1 coat of clear on this rudder tail elevated, so I have to really be careful not to over sand it. And you kind of get a look at what this surface looks like. You can still see scratches. Means the paint's still a little soft. But I have this all sanded out now with 1200. And now what I'll try is to go right from 1200 to the Gorhams and see if the finish pops up, if it comes up. Now let's see, I gotta look through the lens here, see. Now we have a shine, you can get a good view. See, here's the dull part, now watch where it comes into the shine. You can see where the scratches end. And this is just 1200 and Gorhams. Put those hinges down. Remember, this only has 1 coat of clear. When we get the other parts that have much more clear on them, we could be a little more aggressive about buffing it out. This one I really have to be delicate. You notice I'm using a paper towel instead of a sock. When I get to the big parts, the mainframe especially, I'll put a sock on each hand, load up the compound, and go to it. Then every time I touch the plane or hold it or anything, I'm buffing it. And again, you always do a test on the little parts. Little parts are what tell you if the paint on the mainframe is dry enough, and as soon as it is, we'll pull it down here and start working on it. Let's see what that looks like. We've got a pretty nice shine on that now. The final shine will fill in any other scratch. Now, so you can see a little dull spot. Right up here, there's a little dull spot, so I'll work that. Okay, that should give you some idea of what we're going to do now. We're going to do all the little parts, and then we'll get to the mainframe. Now, I just want to take a minute on this. This is the first batch of a new product that we're handling here, and they're electronic digital readout grain scales. Rich, you want to weigh something on this?
Sure, here's
these sell for what are they, $90?
Yes, sir.
$90. Put a quarter on there.
First you turn it on and let it zero.
Okay. 20 grams.
Now
15.
that's in ounces.
Okay.
Okay?
Will it weigh grams too?
Yes, sir. We got to turn the switch. First we turn it off. There's a switch on the side. Let the switch go. Switch underneath.
And that goes from grams to ounces?
Correct. Pounds and ounces.
Okay, anybody's interested in one of these scales for weighing stuff, just give me a call. We'll ship one right out to you.
They don't weigh the same. Quarters. It's accurate to 1 gram.
Okay, so one is 6 and one is 5 or whatever.
Correct. That's the problem. One was like 5.5 probably. The other's 5.
Well, let's weigh some aeroplane stuff and see what it weighs.
Okay.
Okay, we're weighing up a Vico spinner here just to see what possibility. Now, this scale will weigh up to what, Rich? 4 pounds?
2,000 grams.
Up to 2,000 grams. So if you were weighing, it's really a little over 4 pounds. If you were weighing a 70-ounce stun ship, you'd have to take the motor out and weigh it separate.
You shouldn't build 70-ounce stun ships.
Yeah, who you been talking to, Bobby, huh? Anyway, this is a nice new addition to the stuff that we hopefully will sell. And if you have any questions, give me a call, or if you want one, just call up and order one. $90. It's a good product.
That'll actually do right.
Now, one of the tricks that seems to work good if the paint isn't really as dry as you'd like it to be, and this is a little bit wet, is I'm using 1200 paper and Windex. Windex is a good substitute if you don't like the feel of that on your hands. However, there is water in Windex, so if you're doing it on a silver, you really have to be careful. Now, this paint is still a little bit on the soft side, and I do have a couple hours today to do some buffing. I'm hoping I can get at least the top of the wing buffed out. I have all the little parts done. Again, I'm just going to knock this all down. And I'm looking for that dull, flat surface. And once the paint hardens up, it seems like Windex is not that good on hard paint. On soft paint, it seems to cut the soft paint a little bit better. Just common, ordinary Windex. Now you can see here how we're still a little bit wet. We've cut down all the mountaintops, but we still have these little, let's call them valleys here. So we're going to have to keep sanding, and we're doing this with 1200 so we don't have any scratches. And we'll work this whole wing panel over. Now, I'm guessing an average time on a wing panel this size is, you can see the little flat spots. We've knocked all the mountaintops down. Remember that little diagram I showed? Here in between the lettering, we knocked all little mountaintops down. This is a labor-intensive thing. Now, we're looking at maybe spending 2 hours to sand out each panel. Hour and a half, 2 hours. It would vary, but now you can see we have little divots and valleys here. So we're going to sand this until the whole thing is just one smooth, flat surface. Now, what I'm doing is I'm alternating between the Windex and the M600. It seems like the paint in spots is just soft, and I just happen to pick a soft spot over the lettering, but the rest of the paint is cutting a lot nicer with the M600. But what you do, you run a little test. You test both. Test the Windex. Hey, you can even test soapy water if you're really on an economy kick. But you have to watch out for anything with water in it. You can't saturate the wing, or the sheeting is going to start buckling up like a on a washboard, a Polish woman's washboard. Again, the key here is to just have an energy level, have nice big arm muscles, be a tough guy. By the way, once you do this for at least 3 or 4 days, you'll notice your one arm is incredibly strong. You can go hug your wife and just, oh my God, you know, you can arm wrestle people and whatever, arm wrestle alligators or whatever. Anyway, now the second time I've gone over this with the M600. Let's see if we can see the difference on a macro lens. Now you can see the with a little more sanding. Now we only have very few little pits. We have the edges around the line. Even though you can't feel that, still have some little pits in here we want to work on. And just get a feel for just how much sanding you have to do. Now as we go over here, we haven't sanded. This is the part we sanded very lightly. This is the part we haven't sanded at all. This is the orange peel effect that I was talking about earlier on in the video, especially around the lines. You get here, you can see we've done a little bit of sanding, and then out here it's not ready to be buffed, but it's coming along. We want to get to where we don't have any little pits. And I mean, anybody can figure this out, that if you go through, you've got to touch up and then put some more clear on top of it, so you don't put your little touch-up stuff away yet. One of the things came in today, and the wood was real good in, is this stiletto kit. Real nice wood net kit. Okay, anyway, forget about kits. Got these parts buffed out. See how nice the shine on the elevator is? We have the rudder all squared away, the cowling's buffed out. Now you can see we have pretty much of a matte finish on everything. You can't feel anything where any of our birds or, you know, lines or anything are. Everything is crystal smooth and matte finished, flat matte finish. You can even see the little microscopic scratches in here. Now what we're going to do, we're going to start the buffing operation, and let's hope, we'll give this a try. Let's hope we can just go right to the Gorham's polish. That's what we did on the small surfaces, and it seemed to work well. We can go right into Gorham's. So let's get out the socks, reach over, get a pair of socks on your hands, and let's buff away. Now we had a lot of luck with the little parts just going right into the Gorham's polish. But again, if it doesn't seem to pop up reasonably, come up reasonably, well, then the other choice is go back 1 notch into the white or 2 notches into the red. So these socks have already had some Gorham's on them. Take a big glob of Gorham's. Now there's 2 objects to this. Object 1 is you're always buffing a plane. Now even if your other hand is just standing still, you're using pretty much all of your effort. The other part of this is, now like in my case, I have a television going here. I can sit up and watch the television, or I can talk to somebody on a phone, or I can do whatever it is I feel like doing, as long as I can keep buffing. Can turn the time into something other than just buffing. I've always found the best way is a circular motion. Actually, if you're starting this, you're better off doing like one little area at a time, not trying to do a whole wing panel. The only reason I'm trying to do this now is I really want to, I only have about an hour left in this day, and I want to try to get as much of this done as I can. The socks are really a great trick, though. That's a great way to, if you don't want to use socks, you can use paper towels. You can cut up a towel. There's a lot of, you know, a lot of other techniques, but this way I'll give you a lot of surface area gets buffed at one time. Plus, another thing it allows me to do is I have a bad shoulder, so I can kind of rest the bad shoulder when it gets tired, give it a 10-minute rest, and use the other hand. Now, a couple of words about buffing wheels, and I have them all. I have industrial wheels, wheels that go on drills, all kinds of stuff. You are in a tremendous high-risk area when you start buffing paint with a buffing wheel. You can do it. I'm not saying you can't do it, and I have done it, but when you catch a flap or a lead out or anything that causes an impact, that buffing wheel is an accident waiting to happen. It really can be a problem. So if you're going to do that, I'd say go out and try an old plane first. And you'd always need two people, one to hold it, for sure, one to hold on to it, and one to buff it. If you try to do it on your own, you're not only high risk, you're almost in ultra high risk area. Now let's see if we can make this one panel look as good as Midgley's plane. Let's just see what we have so far. You can see our fingers in it here. Starting to bring up a nice shine. Starting to see the reflection of the lights and whatever in there. You can see we're working our way to having a nice finish on this panel. But again, it does take time. These are the kind of things that if you don't allow yourself adequate time, if you try to push this through in 1 or 2 days, it's going to be a problem. I'd say reasonably you're looking at least I can usually do it if I work 3 or 4 hours a day or a night or whatever, and that's usually the amount of time I'd work on it. Job like this, and then I'm tired. 3 or 4 hours a day for a week, you should have something really special at the end of that time. All I got to do out here, I got to cut through a lot of this compound, and finish up at the root. But just to give you an idea how much work is, you're involved in a lot of. You can kind of see the reflection of the light right there. At least if you see this done, if you see what's involved, then you have a real good fighting chance of doing it on your own. When you're just working with a magazine page or a paint label or something, I'm just hoping that by showing this, you could really get to see firsthand, what kind of activity and the amount of effort, the amount of time, the amount of things that go into it, and most of all, what ingredients, socks. Lots of Gorhams, lots of socks, and some other compounds if you think you need them. But you'll find out that the acrylic lacquer, it buffs up beautifully. It really buffs up a lot easier than dope does. Dope is a lot more time consuming to buff up. But lacquer in itself, you need to work with it. You need to get a feel for it. You need to feel like we tried before. I tried Windex, and the Windex worked on the soft spots of the paint where I had extra paint. And the M600 worked on the parts that didn't have extra paint. So given all those factors, if you know all that stuff, you have a real good chance of figuring out this piece of the puzzle of getting that nice finish, that front row finish. I have both wing panels sitting here finished. I have to start on the body, start on the back, but the wing panels seem to buff up real nice. Again, just a thought, if you're doing this, one of the thoughts you should have is to always do the bottom first. what I did in this case, because I was wanting to get started on this, I wanted to see if this paint was really ready to go. And it really is a little soft. This really should have waited another couple of days. But I'm just anxious to get it started. We have Midgley coming down and Chris McMillan coming down and so many things going on in the shop here that I really wanted to get this moving. This was kind of like a little bit of a rush job on my part, but seems to be okay now. We have the panels, and now we're going to start on the fuselage. You can see the fuselage here. Let's look real close, see what the quality of this paint. You can see, you can even hear it. It's rough. When you rub a buffed out, no noise. You can see how nice the gold looks after it's buffed out. The gold really does have a nice look. The gold lettering. I'm starting to work out the fuselage here. Started with the top scoop. Again, when you're working on a fuselage now, you have to be real careful about edges. There's all little edges and sharp spots, where on a wing you only really have the leading and trailing edges to worry about. Again, I really wish we had the time constraint here that I could put this aside for another couple of days, but we're just falling too far behind relative to all the other things that have to be done. Now, there was a spot up here where I had already rubbed through, buffed through, and I had to touch it up, so I want to be real careful there. It's like a little sharp edge. Now I want to get right into the fillets with the sandpaper. Once you use the paper for a little while, it really softens up. Again, we're going to knock it all down to a matte finish. What I like to do with the back part of the fuse is lay the nose on the table and have the wings standing straight up and down and put the body in my lap. A couple of rags or towels, that always seems to be a good way to do it. I just about finished sanding out the fuselage here. Just want to put the final sanding on this bottom. Won't have to worry too much about the nose because I'm going to try to get the bottom of this with a little bit of Imron when I do the cowl. I'll take care of that. Try to radius a little bit all these edges. And it'll be time to get these socks. Flip this puppy over. Let's see what this looks like. Now what's important is look around, try to find some bad spots. Any spots you see you might have missed, because it's easy to miss them. Once you get the socks on your hands, you just want to go like a wild man buffing away. At least I do anyway. I want to try to at least finish the body tonight. Now this is where it really pays to have the socks on. You really can make some good progress with the socks. Get in that little trough, that little scoop up here. And the thing that allows you to do is do both sides of the body at once, if you can see the motion I got going here. Just gives you one little advantage. Try to make the day go fast here. Try to get this finished. I'm hoping I can finish up the body before I go for the day. And tomorrow the only thing I'll have left to do is the bottom of the wing. And we'll start assembling it, putting it together. Maybe on the next video we'll get it put together and describe what's known as bench trimming a model. Trimming it before you actually fly it. Where we arrive at the numbers, how we get them together. We still have to make up the wheel pants. I think what I'll do is just make up grass gear so we can test fly this guy. And of course we will get the test flights on video. Absolutely. And maybe it'll go in on the wing over. Maybe Midgley will release it prematurely. I won't be at the handle yet. Who knows? Anyway. If the only thing you pick up from this video is the socks, believe me, you learned a lot. Have those nice big biceps. You can buy some of them cut-off shirts. Get a tattoo on your arm. Get a nice tattoo of Tom Lay's butt or something. Who knows? Well, it looks like we're going to finish everything but the bottom tonight. So we'll pick this up tomorrow with get out the Bengay for the arms. This guy is buffed, except for the bottom of the wing. Everything is buffed. This was one heck of a day's work. Now we'll just do a little walk around here and see how much progress we made on getting this guy buffed out today. This came out exceptionally well. The little trough, whatever you want to call it, scoop. Got the whole upper wing surfaces done. Have the back end done. Again, because we're trying to keep the back real light, I buffed through in a few spots and I'll just touch them up with the airbrush. Canopy is exceptional here. I really like the way the canopy looks in real life. I don't know how this is going to show up on a video, but in real life that's a pretty slick looking canopy, even if Midgley doesn't say so himself. Anyway, canopy kind of came out the way we had planned. Got the rest of this buffet. Now, the only thing left to do is the bottom, and I'll try to get here early tomorrow morning. It's commitment time. I really want to finish this guy up. Get here nice and early tomorrow morning before the phone starts ringing and get in a good 2 or 3 hours before the day's work begins, and I'll be able to finish him up. I wound up about 90% of the plane doing 1200 in Gorhams. Some of the real stubborn spots I had to use the compound, not many. But I still have it here. I leave the cans open right to the very end. I used up about 12 socks. And this is about as, at this point in time, with the paint still a little soft and the gnats are a long time away, this is enough buffing on this. And we'll get the reason for buffing this out again. Before you're probably thinking one of the things you can do is, yeah, just put the whole plane together and balance the CG and do all that stuff. Yes, you can make the wheel pants and everything, but I am just a crazy person is what it boils down to, and I love to see these things all buffed out. You know, I mean, 3/4 of the appeal of a plane is in the finish, and 3/4, 9/10, and so I really do like having them like this, and I'll sleep better at night. I'll actually sleep better at night knowing that this guy is all buffed out. And it'll allow me to spend some time with Dave and with Russ, the other guys that are going to be building Cardinals, and hopefully we'll have a nice little Air Force come Nationals time. So until tomorrow, till we get to do the bottom, I guess we'll just order the pizza now and be out of here. Now we'll finish out this video with a few pictures from our album, so it'll end nice and even, nice at the end. We hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you got a lot out of it. The next tape we're going to try to cover is bench trimming, assembling the model, getting the hinges all to work, tank, motor, making up the header, all that kind of stuff. Be some interesting stuff on the next tape. And then, well, maybe we'll start on the gold guy. We don't know yet. This shop series of tapes has proven to be so popular that really looking forward to doing another plane on video for you. There's Dave and his son, and we're anticipating the birth of his second child real soon. And come on, Dave. 3 kids is the right amount, Dave. 3. Got that number? 3. Yeah, some old pictures of the green guy when he had a 60 in him. The old picture of Louisiana Lightning here. Old picture of Tradition when he was nice and new. Concourse-O-Matic. When he was new, he was new. Boy, is he beat up now. 2,000 flights later, still flying. Now, if you're curious how we developed our handle, this is a picture showing at one time all the handles we had used for development purposes, and how the handle evolved into what we sell now. All these experiments, all these handles made up, all these tests, all this, everything. Just so you can have a bulletproof handle on the first try. Dial a phone, get a handle. Picture Gerald Champ wiping down his Oriental here. Beautiful plane if you've seen the other pictures on the other videos. Here's an old picture of Flying Tradition. This is at Scott Smith's contest. Great contest. If you've never been to Coxsackie, come on down. Anyway, we're going to wrap this video up. We're almost at the end. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll join us on tape 13.